Fiction and reality. New stories, new ideas. Little Beth Entertainment.
Hey everybody, welcome to The Model Rocket Show at TheRocketryShow.com. I am your host, The Rocket Noob, and today we are talking with Frank Burke of Dyna Soar Rocketry. Frank makes these amazing, large, but very lightweight, radio-controlled rocket gliders. They go up like a rocket, and they come down like an airplane or a glider, basically. You may have seen these online on Facebook or on the Rocketry forum. They're pretty amazing, beautiful creations, and you can get one or more because he makes and sells the kits at his website, DynaSoarRocketry.com. That's DynaSoar Rocketry.com. Of course, we will link to Frank's website in the show notes at our website, TheModelRocketShow.com, if you want to check those out and pick yourself up one or several. The other fun thing about this show is that I am not the host. Model rocket guy Jesse Yu, one of the co-hosts of The Rocketry Show, is taking the host seat on this one. I had a scheduling conflict, and Jesse knows Frank. He loves Frank's work, and he's seen his rocket gliders fly on several occasions, so we thought he'd be the perfect person to sit down and chat with Frank. The Model Rocket Show thanks RocketryForum.com for their support. This is L. Corinth, that's my username, and I've been on the Rocketry Forum for 7 years. The Rocketry Forum is a global community of Rocketeers who openly discuss all aspects of hobby rocketry. So if you have a question, hop on and ask. There are hundreds of experts who can answer just about any rocketry question you have. So check them out today at RocketryForum.com. All right, let's get to it. Jesse Yu talking with Frank Burke of Dyna Soar Rocketry on the Model Rocket Show at TheModelRocketShow.com, starting in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to the Model Rocket Show, a podcast that is all about low and mid-power model rockets, like the ones you buy at hobby stores and fly in a park. And now, here is your host, Daniel the Rocket Noob.
Hey everybody, this is Jesse from The Rocketry Show, filling in for the noob for the Model Rocket Show at TheModelRocketShow.com. Our very special guest is somebody that I'm very honored to talk to and very honored to have on this show. And he's also a personal friend. I got to hang out with him a few times. I'd like to present to you Mr. Frank Burke from Dyna Soar Rocketry. Frank offers a huge line of vertical boosted gliders that he helps maneuver on the way down. He's going to talk to us a little bit about that. Frank, sir, how are you doing, my friend?
Doing great. Glad to be here.
We're glad to have you for sure. It's been, we've been trying to get you on for a while, and we're glad we're able to do that for this. The Model Rocketry Show is based on a low power and mid power rocketry, and we understand that the gliders that you produce are also around that realm. But, even more so than that, they're complex, but also not. So, yeah, let me get some information on what you're doing there with Dyna Soar. How did Dyna Soar get started? What made you want to, start producing these awesome gliders that you put out for, the communities here?
So, back in 2005, I was just getting back into RC modeling, and I ran across some things on RC Groups, which is a forum, and a lot of guys were doing things with Depron, which is a expanded polystyrene foam sheet that they use in Europe for floor and wall insulation. And I started making my own designs and posting plans. And I posted an X15 plan, and one of the users built one of them and put a rocket motor in it and made a little cradle for an RC airplane and dropped it off of the airplane and airlit the motor. And I thought, hey, that's pretty neat. And so I started doing the same thing to some of my designs. And I did a presentation in 2015 at Narcon. And I got a lot of good feedback on using foams for radio control rocket gliders, which hadn't really been done widely.
Right. Yeah, I agree.
Up until that point. And people were asking me, hey, these are really neat, but I don't know where to get the materials because these weren't, these are Rocketeers. These weren't RC airplane guys. So they asked me if I'd be interested in maybe making some kits. And so 2015, I started doing them, and I've been doing them ever since and refining them, coming up with new models. I've designed about 60 different unique kits in that time. Some of them were short runs. Some of them were special things when I could get access to particular nose cones or body tubes or good deals on things. And so, when I run out, that was it for those kind of things. Some I did pre-orders, like a Klingon battle cruiser, which required laser cutting. So I had to order a certain number of those parts. And so when they're done, I can't do one-offs. But most of the kits all the kits that I do now are all cut to order. So I go down in my garage and use the templates I've made and cut out your kit and ship it to you. So there's all the ones that I'm making now are they're currently in the line and should be there unless I don't get much interest for a year or so, and then I drop this. So I drop things from time to time. Right. If they're not getting interest, and sometimes I'll bring stuff back. Sometimes you hit a good market window and people are really into something.
That's pretty much the industry. I mean, I've noticed that a lot of, rocket manufacturers, and I know pretty much everybody that's out there. That's exactly the point. And, depending on the parts that you have and what you're available and, the designs and, the popularity. I mean, there's some rockets that stick around for a while and there's some that, kind of fall to the wayside and then all of a sudden they make this big appearance back. So I can imagine that you go through a lot of that.
Yeah, it's odd. The Klingon battle cruiser, I got a huge interest. Like you get this small pocket of people that are really into Star Trek. Mm-hmm. Got to have one of those, right? I sold 30 of them, in a couple of months.
That's still pretty impressive. 30, wow.
Well, this is a really small niche market, right? So you've got to find people that are, because what I typically say are RC guys are very cheap. So they're like, why would I want to spend $6 or $7 for one flight when I can buy a $15 brushless motor and fly it forever?
Sure.
Rocket guys I don't care how much the motors cost, but I'm afraid I'm going to kill it. So you got to find that small crossover of people that are willing to learn or comfortable with RC fixed wing planes and rocket guys, right? So like that Klingon, I got this huge rush and then nothing for a year. And so it'll be like that, right? You'll get something, that like you got Battlestar Galactica guys that just have to have this thing, or Star Trek guys, and then just nothing. And you'll think, what, I thought it was really neat, but that's so that was that small group of people that really thought that was neat. And, you never really know. Anything SR-71 based or X-15 based is pretty popular.
Yeah, for sure. I don't think that a lot of folks have the knowledge of the background that you have in rocketry. Can you kind of explain some of your past history as far as you being a rocketeer? I know you have built some big birds back in the day, and we've even talked, we've mentioned you on the Rocketry Show about, some, your 5.5-inch Iris clone that you had created long ago that I tried to compete with and just kind of failed at. But, I mean, can you kind of give, the listeners a background of what you have done rocketry-wise for yourself?
Sure. So I did rocketry back in the mid-'70s when I was a kid, from the, 8 to 10-year-old range. Up in Seattle, we flew at the Kent Boeing Space Center. They had a model rocket club there. Got it. And my dad would take me, and I did, typical Estes stuff. And then, got out of it, did RC stuff for a while. College, those kind of things. And then about early to mid 90s, discovered, AeroTech motors and high power stuff. A guy named Dave Davis up in Seattle, and Bill Manis, who was Impulse Aerospace back in the day. And they were flying out of Monroe, Washington. And I ran across them, got back into it, did some, I did a big Lock V2 that was on the cover of High Power Rocketry. Wow. Back in the day, mid 90s, did some hybrid stuff, that Iris that you were talking about, that used some of the, some demo flights for AeroTech's J and K hybrid motors that were just coming out because of the ATF regulations. Did some two-stage stuff. And then it kind of went on the back burner again when I had kids. And then got back into it a little bit when I started doing the rocket gliders. And now I kind of play with all kind of, model rocket size things, rocket gliders up through H power level, now. I'm primarily focused on the rocket glider stuff. That's easy for me to. I don't have to go to launches. I can go 10 minutes away. I've got 2 different RC clubs. So, and George Rocker, my buddy, lives about a half mile away. So, I've got a lot of places I can fly from. So that's typically what I'll do. I'll go to launches still for fun and fly some of the big stuff I've got. But that's
so I've been privileged to see you fly some of the gliders. The first time I saw you fly was at NARAM 60 back in 2018 down in Pueblo, here in Colorado, where I reside. That's the first time I got to see you fly some stuff. And then, by surprise, you just happened to be at FITS, Fire in the Sky in Washington back in 2019, around Memorial Day. And I'm going to get to see you hopefully here in the next, couple of weeks here at NSL down in Colorado again when it's, in my neck of the woods. So that'll be the 3rd time I get to see you fly some stuff. So I'm super excited about that.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Yeah.
Heck yeah. Frank, one of the big questions that I have from people that I've spoke to about the gliders that you present, because you always put posts on Facebook, you always have a very big presence on the Rocketry forum. And some of the things that, I hear feedback-wise is that seems too complicated for me. And, I listened to a recent podcast that you did on another show, and, you had it kind of explained, some of the build and that it can take up to, an hour to 90 minutes to put one of these together. So it doesn't sound like it's as challenging as what people are perceiving it to be, right? So can you kind of talk about like how you would migrate from doing rocketry into building one of your gliders and, sending it off?
Right. So the building part is extremely simple. So that was part of the reason why I was making these kits, and my approach to these are I'm doing the majority of the prefab work that you would probably screw up if you're not an RC guy.
Okay.
So I'm cutting the wings out. I'm hinging the control surfaces.
Okay.
I'm pre-punching holes for the actuators. The control rods are already bent to the right length.
Okay.
I include wiring that is what you'll need to adapt your battery to plug into the receiver to power it.
Okay.
It includes rail buttons. The holes for the rail buttons are already pre-punched.
Wow.
The body tubes are hand slotted for the tail and or wing, depending.
Okay.
And the spars are generally pre-installed, or at least they're grooved for where they would go. And they include a special tape to tape over the spar once you glue it in if it's not already glued. Body tubes are cut to length. The nose cone shoulder is already cut off. That's typically where you'll Velcro the receiver and or battery in. So really, I mean, in the simplistic way, really, when you take the parts out of the box, you're unfolding the wing, gluing a joint, maybe.
Okay.
Gluing it to the fuselage or sticking it through a slot in the body tube and gluing it in place, and then sticking the tail into a slot and gluing that in place. And then you glue, 1 to 3 little strips on the motor tube, sand them so they'll slide in, and you glue that in, and you're done.
You're making it sound way too easy.
It literally is very simple. Maybe you want to add 20 minutes if you want to take a straight edge and kind of and an X-Acto and cut a bevel on the surface edges instead of sanding it, because it's a little easier to do without tearing the foam. You can get a little heavy-handed with sandpaper. I now just cut a little bevel on each side, just a 16th inch, take a straight edge and zip it down, and you can do that ahead of time. And that's it. And then the radio installation, the servos are just glued in place on the wing. I found that double back tape tends to loosen when it gets real hot.
Right.
So I just use the foam safe super glue. This is all done with foam safe super glue and accelerator.
That was one of my next questions.
Epoxy's heavy, no hot glue. Don't use any other glues, just foam safe CA.
Okay.
And all the construction goes really, really quick. And then you glue the 2 servos in place and make sure the controls are straight. Make sure they move the right direction. Route a couple of wires into the tube, tape them down. And it comes with Velcro to Velcro the receiver and the battery in place. You have to provide your own servos and battery and
got it,
et cetera.
Right.
And then you just stick a loaded motor in and balance it.
Wow.
And that's it. Finishing, A lot of, the kits all come with white body tubes and nose cones, and the foam is white. So typically if the model is white, I don't paint it at all. I'll maybe put a little clear packing tape on the bottom of the tube if you're going to land in wet grass or something, just so it doesn't get wet.
That makes sense.
Painting, the Depron foam is sensitive to paints, so you have to be careful if you're using a water-based acrylic. That should be okay. I use Tester's enamel spray.
All right.
In the little rattle cans, and if you don't get real close to it, that won't melt the foam, and it looks real good. They're a little more pricey.
Sure.
And then the decals, the kits don't come with decals because I prefer cut vinyl.
Okay.
Decals, and I've worked with Mark at Sticker Shock.
Yeah, for sure.
And I've designed the sets of decals to be kind of a reasonable price that look good, and all of the online instructions, all the instructions are online with pictures, and so you can see how the kits, if you just click on any picture off the main website, it'll go to the kit instructions. You can see how it goes together step by step.
Awesome.
If you have any questions, and then there's a link on each instruction set to Mark's website to order the decals, and they're self-adhesive, so you just apply them onto the foam, and then you use a hot hair dryer and rub them down with your finger, and the foam has a little bit of texture, but when you soften them that way, it really conforms into the foam, and it looks like it's painted, and they look so much better than just normal peel and stick stickers or water-based stuff, which would require you to paint and then put some kind of clear coat. A lot of clear coats will melt foam. So I generally don't go with that. And the reason they don't come with the decals is a lot of people are getting Cricut cutters now, and they want to do their own thing. So they don't want to pay $15 or $20, which what it would cost me to get them from Mark.
Right.
And
the time to produce them yourself. Right.
And I just don't sell enough to warrant, investing in a, something like that and expanding into that. And I like, supporting Mark. He's a great guy. He does good work. He can customize anything that, he has. And so if you got something and you want something different, he can do it. He does a great job. So yeah, and the decals, and then, for little added details, most of my models, I use a fine line Sharpie and some straight edges, and I'll put panel lines. I'll look at a 3-view, and, if it looks a little sparse, I'll add a few things that kind of look like maybe it should be. It's all made up. Nothing's really serious. Or on the black models, I'll use a silver Sharpie, in the same manner. And it makes things kind of pop a little bit. And it takes half an hour, 45 minutes to add that. And it's real simple. So there's not much to it. It's the main thing with these kits are you need to be a comfortable fixed wing RC flyer.
Okay.
So you need to be able to fly a fixed wing plane that goes about 50 to 60 miles an hour with ailerons.
Okay.
And if you can handle that, you can handle that. That's 50 or 60 miles an hour is about how fast these boost. The X-15 a little faster. And then once they're gliding, they're extremely light. These things all weigh between 5 to about 12 ounces.
Wow.
And they're pretty big. They're 2 feet to 3 feet long, maybe a little bigger, depending on the model. And that's the key. And so they're very gentle in glide. It's just the boost. There really isn't a good way to do a hands-off boost with these.
Right.
Just, you have to keep your head in it. There's always a little wind.
Right.
The wires from the igniter can pull a little bit sometimes. And so you just always have to be putting the model where you want. But you can fly in very heavy. I mean, I've flown in 12 to 13 mile an hour winds.
I've seen you do
handle it just fine. Yeah. So once they clear the rail, you just point it the direction you want, and then it doesn't care that the wind's blowing. And it's a little bit of fun when the wind's blowing because you can kind of get them in the right angle and they'll just hover.
Kind of catch it.
You just kind of do an elevator landing where they just kind of come slowly down. And
Let me give a testament to this. So I've seen Frank probably fly, I'm going to say probably, around 8 gliders total in the amount of time that I've, got to see some of your stuff. So, let me attest to the design of these birds that he creates here. If you are interested in getting into gliders, don't be afraid to pick up one of his kits because they are cost effective. I mean, you can easily get one with shipping, from Frank, fairly inexpensive. And then you have to buy the, a couple of parts that he said, and then you have to buy a receiver, right? Or I'm sorry, please forgive my ignorance. The transmitter, right?
And the receiver as well, but yeah.
Okay, right. So you have to get those, but once you get the one, you can use it. You can use the transmitter on various, and then you just have to get receivers for your different models, right?
Yeah, the transmitter is a one-time purchase, really. The ones now, they have, like 250 model memory.
Right.
I've got about 70 rocket gliders ready to fly.
Wow, dude,
right now,
seriously.
Right. So, and you've got tons of memory, and you just select which one you want. And, with the I use Spectrum, but any of the, spread spectrum technology, right? They bind to a particular model, right? So you can't accidentally fly it on the wrong model setting, because if you're not on the right model for that receiver, it won't listen to it. So back in the old days, you had different models, but your receivers they were just a dumb receiver. So you could set it on the wrong model and have your controls backwards because it wasn't right. But that doesn't really happen anymore. So that's a one-time purchase. And then receivers can range from $10 to $30, and servos $5 to $20 a piece. And the little battery, I just use a single 1S stick battery. It's a $9 E-Flight.
Wow.
Battery, and I use that for all of my gliders, from little stuff up to my H-powered models, because the servos aren't really pulling much load.
Interesting.
And again, these aren't sailplanes, right? So these are not competition, long duration gliders. There's a market for that, and there's competitions for that, and these get very efficient, and they're basically a pod and boom. Like a discus launch glider, very efficient wings, and they'll boost very high and they'll glide for a long time. That's not my bag personally.
Okay.
For me, they perform great, but they all kind of look the same. So if you want performance, that's great. For me, I've always liked things that looked like a rocket plane or a jet fighter or something like that. So I make stuff that's easy to fly, that looks cool, and you'll get a minute or two.
They do look pretty cool, and
they're you can fly them in high wind, and they're fun, and you don't hold up a launch for 10 minutes while they're waiting for you flying around, and they're great for school demos because you don't need
there you go.
100-foot area is plenty big enough to land. You don't need to worry about losing them in trees. It's its own thing, but that's personally what I like to do. So I'm sharing the stuff that I have fun doing. And
Matt Steele has said it before. I build these for myself and 100 of my closest friends. So it sounds like you're kind of doing the same thing. So hats off to you guys for that. So
maybe an order of magnitude smaller, but
no, I feel that too. So let's talk about the motors. Go ahead and explain the different types of motors that you use. I do understand they're 24 millimeter.
I'm using some 18s now as well. I've designed some for those. So,
nice.
So foam doesn't like fire, and unfortunately, as great as Estes is, the 24 millimeter E-motors do not have a 0% failure rate, and when they let go,
whatever do you mean, Frank?
Pretty toast. He's pretty much toast, right? So, and their thrust curves on the Estes motors are a much faster burn rate.
Right.
Same with many composites too. And so, if you push models very fast, you risk flutter, which means you have to make them much stiffer, which means they're a little heavier, a little more expensive because you're using more carbon fiber. And they're harder to fly. So if you don't have your trims perfect and you have a motor that burns for a second or two, and your trims aren't right, you just do a figure 9 and it's dead.
Got it.
Right.
So you don't have any play time at all. Okay.
No. So these motors that I'm using were specially designed by AeroTech for gliders.
Yes.
So they're an end burning motor. So they have a little slot or a little small core on the very end, which gives you more surface area. So you get a little spike off the pad to get you moving. So the controls are working, and then they're just a constant linear thrust for 7 or 8 seconds. And so it's a nice gentle boost, right? They keep them, around 50 or 60 miles an hour.
Right.
And it's less stress on the airframe. It's less stress on the pilot. I've like the YF-12 model. That's an SR-71 based model.
Yes.
That one's stiff enough that you can fly it on E20s or E30s, but because of drag, they really don't go as high as the long burn motor that is pushing you slower. And it just goes much faster. So it's more nerve-wracking, and it sounds a little cooler, but you don't really get anything out of it more than using the low thrust motors. The only and then for so these are E6s typically for the majority of the models. These are 24 millimeter. I have single use motors that I've had AeroTech build for me, and we have the reloadables, which take a special casing that I carry at an extremely good price because I've ordered these in bulk, that have a solid forward closure. These reloads won't fit properly in the standard 2440 casing. The casing's a little too long. So this one has a fixed forward closure. So it's very simple to reload. You just have propellant in a cardboard liner, an O-ring, and a nozzle.
Wow.
You lube it, slip it together, boom. When you're done, you wipe it out with a baby wipe every three loads or whatever. And that's all there is to it. Right. They make an 18 millimeter version, which is a D2.3.
Okay.
Same idea. That one does.
Wow, 2.3. Crazy.
Yes. Yeah. It's again, it's an 8-second burn.
Holy moly, dude.
And those are good for models up to about 5 ounces, which is what my small ones are designed around.
Okay.
And they'll boost to a similar altitude as the big ones. They're just smaller, and they glide about the same glide time. It's all sort of, Reynolds number, bigger, bigger the air supports it. Get a little more lift. So smaller isn't quite as efficient generally. But now that 18 millimeter casing does take a plugged forward closure that I also carry, and I sell the casing with the plugged forward. That's the only way that I'm the only one to sell them that way.
Okay.
But you don't have to use the plugged forward closure, but you have to make sure that you block the forward closure so that no delay fire will get forward into the model, or you can have some. So everything's designed around these longer burn motors except the X15.
Okay.
That one was a special case where it's a little too heavy for that D2.3, and the 24 millimeter E6 would be too heavy for the CG shift. So as the motor burns, it gets nose heavy, and the model needs to be large enough that you can trim that shift out with a little up trim. And the model's small. And so that one uses the D13 or D24 reloads without the ejection charge. So that's the only one that uses a high thrust motor, but generally they boost extremely straight. So it's just and it's up at 400 feet, and then you're gliding it around. So if you don't touch the sticks, generally it's over before you know it. And that's the only one that really uses that needs the higher thrust motors.
Can you add a little bit more detail about that transition that we have from the rocket to the glider, and the shifting of the, center pressure and the center of gravity? Like, can you kind of explain that a little bit? Because I know that rocketers are wanting to know about how that works.
Right. So these all boost. Generally, I've designed them all to boost vertically off of a rail. So you'll see gliders a lot of time boost off to kind of special pads at an angle. Those are because the model's maybe a little heavier to boost vertically. And when you boost at an angle, the wing takes some of the weight and allows you to get faster, and it's a little more efficient. You can kind of zoom up. Also, a lot of high-performance sailplanes have an airfoil, and so as you go faster, they'll tend to generate more lift, and they'll kind of pitch up. These all have flat plate wings, so if there's no angle of attack, they don't tend to pitch. They'll just keep boosting straight.
Interesting.
But they're light enough that they can do that, and it's not a problem. So that, you can use them at a normal launch with a regular pad. They're on rail buttons, and there's big wings. So if you were to tip these over, the wings or the wind will hit those, and it might bind the rail buttons.
Okay.
But the rail's much better because you don't get a whippy rod, especially with these big wings. The wind can, twist the model and stuff. So a rail's much better in windy conditions, and as soon as it's off the rail, you can, point it at an angle if you want to. But the whole idea is these are designed to boost slightly tail heavy, but by the time they get off the rail, they're fine for control. They're not too pitchy.
Okay.
And then as the motor burns, because the motor's in the tail in these, you start losing tail weight, so they're nose heavy. So basically, you're just steering it. I like to fly downwind, so the wind's blowing, from my back. So it'll tend to blow the model away from me if it's going to blow it anywhere. If you blow it with the wind blowing at you, the model will tend to come back at you, and it can get behind you easily. And I find it's harder to correct that. So if there's any wind, I tend to launch so that the model will get blown slightly away from me so I can see it. And generally, you just, you boost vertically or maybe a little bit away from you so you're not looking right up the smoke trail. On some mornings where it's really humid, you'll get a big smoke trail and you can lose the model in the smoke trail. So, I stand a little to the side or whatever so you get a good view. And you just boost it, and I count to about 7 or 8. And when I hear it start to peter out, I just push it over level.
Oh my gosh.
And when it gets slow, I've got a switch on my transmitter programmed to give me a little bit of up trim on the controls. So most of the modern computer radios have either a flight mode, which means you can have different settings on your model that are programmed to a switch position, or they'll have a flap switch, which when you put flaps on an actual airplane, the model typically will pitch up or down depending on the design.
Okay.
And so generally those models have a function that says when you put the flaps down, you can also put a little bit of elevator trim to compensate. And so I don't use the flaps, but I use the elevator trim function the same way. So you can use it either with a flight mode or with that. And it's very easy to program. I have a video. There's a video on the website link and on YouTube that shows how to program those. And so I have recommended settings for each of the models.
Awesome.
How much up trim you'll need. And then it's just, you fly a couple of times and you figure out exactly, how you built the model and how much movement you have and get that all trimmed out. So yeah, you just pitch over level and then you hit your switch and then it's in glide mode and then you're just steering it around.
All right, we're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back after this. It's time to talk about our show sponsor, eRockets.biz, your home for unique model rocket kits, as well as the world's largest selection of model rocket parts from Semrock. In business since 2009, eRockets doesn't just stock many of your favorite in-production kits. They also produce their own versions of popular out-of-production models many of you have come to enjoy over the years. And I want to talk about a couple new things that they just talked about at NARAM 62. The first one being the Semrock Pro Cherokee. This is a Semrock Pro line. This is a large rocket, flies on 29 millimeter motors, and it is 2.6 inches in diameter. It is 43.5 inches long. This is an upscale of the classic Cherokee D, and of course, it's got all those great decals from Sticker Shock, and it's a fantastic looking rocket, and it flies on motors, anything from F to H motors. So you could get this. You could do this with a level 1 if you wanted to go for your high power. But it is a beautiful, large rocket with plywood fins, plywood centering rings, and it's just a gorgeous, gorgeous thing. You can get that at eRockets.biz. Also, I'm going to talk to you about this because you need a good sanding block. Now, mine that I have is the Easy Touch hand sander from Great Plains. It's a contoured aluminum. I've got it right here. It's my contoured aluminum hand sander, and it is a great hand sander. There's just one problem. A few years ago, Hobbyco, that owned a lot of hobby outlets, you may remember they went bankrupt, and it almost took Estes down, and it scared a lot of us until the Langford family came in and bought Estes and saved it. Well, Great Plains was part of Hobbyco, and they had this great hand sander, and Great Plains still seems to be around, but they don't make that hand sander anymore. And it's a great sanding block. Now, you could just take a piece of wood and wrap some sandpaper around it, but this is nice contoured sanding block, and you stick adhesive sandpaper on it, and it is perfectly flat. Well, eRockets now has a hand sander, and it is a 3D printed hand sander. It is contoured. It is similar in shape and size to this old Great Plains hand sander, but I tell you what, they can print them on demand because they're 3D printed, and They are only $2.99 right now at erockets.biz. This is a great hand sander, and the fact that it is made out of 3D printed plastic, it does not have to be aluminum. It's lightweight. It's beautiful. I was so excited when I saw this on YouTube at the NAR YouTube channel with the manufacturers forum at NARM. So you got to check this out. It's the eRockets Contoured Hand Sander. 2 inches by 5 inches. It comes with 220 grit sandpaper, but of course you can get adhesive sandpaper in all different grits. So you can shape your fins, you can sand things smooth. It's great. That is also at erockets.biz. If you need parts for your custom builds, that's no problem. eRockets supplies the Semrock line of airframes, nose cones, centering rings, motor mounts, and so much more. They have more rocket parts available than anyone on Earth. So check out erockets.biz today to learn more. erockets.biz. If rocketry scares you, buy a train set.
Daniel loves your model rocket questions. If you have any, send them to noob@themodelrocketshow.com. That's N00B @themodelrocketshow.com. Now, back to Daniel.
Hey, everybody. It's Jesse standing in for the noob for the Model Rocket Show. We're talking with our special guest, Mr. Frank Burke from Dyna Soar Rocketry. Great innovator for some gliders that he's displaying at some, launches nationwide and local, and we'll talk about that here in just a second. Frank, we were just discussing, some of the motors that you use. One of the questions that I personally had, because when I see you here at NSL, I'm gonna have to pick up a couple, because I think I'm ready for, messing with stuff like this. I have no idea, and how to pilot any of the gliders or anything like that. So, you had given some recommendations on some of the transmitters that you use, and then you also said that you provide settings for your gliders, based on the transmitters and things of that nature. So, my next question is, how do you transition into using, gliders if you've never done it before? What do you recommend as far as that goes?
The main thing is you need to, just like you would in being a full-scale pilot, you do sort of some ground school. In this case, you can get a flight simulator, which are available, which can help you get your left and right confusion figured out. Okay. And kind of learn how the controls work. Those are not terribly expensive and very, very good. When I was teaching people how to fly RC, the people that would come back after having used a simulator, they had made progress as opposed to the people that were just doing the live instruction and coming back after a week where they kind of have to catch back up a little bit to where they were. It definitely buys you something. Okay. And then, start with a trainer. I recommend an E-Flight Radian, or there's a Micro Radian, and those are a motor glider, so they're an electric glider. And so you can power them up to altitude, shut the motor off, glide it around, getting used to dead stick, where you don't have power. Got it. And then, set up for your landings and then power back up again. And you can do that. And then transition to something a little more advanced that would have ailerons, where you have more precise control, where those Radians are more like if you let go of the stick, they'll tend to, they want to stay level. Okay. Basically, where most of these models have ailerons and they're neutral, meaning, so some of them have a little dihedral, meaning there's a little up sweep in the wing. Those help to keep the model level unless you're forcing it to do a turn command. Ones with flat wings will generally stay in whatever position you put them in. And so those you need to sort of correct and put them back flat when you're done doing a turn. And this makes sense to me. You want something right like that. Now, you were talking about your friend George, and he had zero experience with RC, but he thought my kits were so cool. They are. He said, hey, I want to learn how to do this. So he and his son both started with a simulator. I think he started with a Radian and then advanced to where he thought he was comfortable enough, and then, built a couple of my kits. And, his 7-year-old son has flown several rocket glider fights on his own, and he's doing great. Yes. So, it's not really age specific. It's just, if you take a little bit of time to do that, it's you can definitely achieve that. And this is a great time now to get into RC, because electric flight performance on trainers, and they have safe modes which help correct you if you get into trouble. Okay. You can disable that as you get more advanced, and because there's those are great, but they don't teach you anything, right? At some point you need to be able to get out of your own situations, right? but they help you transition to the point where you'd be comfortable doing that. And, replacement parts are pretty cheap, and you don't need to spend a lot of time building something and then, crushing your soul when you destroy it.
Right.
Which, back when I taught myself how to fly, right, there weren't any almost ready to fly, right? They were wood kits. You had to build it. You had to cover it with the iron-on material. And then you had to teach yourself how to fly and how to fix it. And hopefully you didn't destroy it before you got confident enough to fly it. So it's a great time now to be learning RC stuff. I want to make it clear the quad or the drone.
Yes.
I hate that term, but
right.
Those are great, but they're self-stabilizing, right? So if you take your hands off the sticks, they'll stay level, and they require their own skill set, but they're not a replacement for learning how to fly a fixed-wing aircraft that requires some airspeed, and they'll stall if you get them too slow, right? That's you need to be comfortable flying something like that. The drone will be great for learning your left-right and not getting confused in terms of that, but you really, it's like, saying I can fly a helicopter and I can fly a fixed-wing plane, right? They're different.
I understand.
And, FPV stuff, that's another one that people ask me about all the time, but it's tough because, when the rocket boosts, you're looking straight at the sky. So you have
right.
no idea if you're pitching 10 or 15 degrees until you level out.
Okay.
So I personally haven't done that. I try to keep things light and simple. Adding that stuff, add some weight. So you'd want a model that can handle that a little bit if you're going to try that. But you'd really probably want to do your boost visually and then transition over to FPV once you're in the glide mode till you get really comfortable, or have some stabilizing, settings if you want to try something complicated like that. But, there's a learning curve, but, like anything good,
that sounds like fun.
Some effort, and it's not super hard.
Yeah, it sounds like fun. It doesn't sound like there's a huge expense to it. I mean, you're pretty transparent about everything here. There's nothing hidden, so I mean that's good.
Yeah.
And
I have links to all this stuff that I use on the website, so you can see what the things cost. A decent name brand Spectrum transmitter is around $200, but again, that's a one-time purchase. You can look at altimeters, and altimeters can cost $75 to $150 or
right.
more if you got GPS. So, it's not really that. It's just sort of, mentally, what are you willing to spend? If you're into RC stuff, that's cheap. If you're into more rocket stuff, it seems expensive, but it's not really. It's not really a huge expense.
So, you started up in 2015, and I remember one of the first websites that I saw was, Daniel the Noob's blog, and, I keep blaming that guy. That is his fault that he kind of got me back into rocketry. Well, it's kind of your fault too, Frank, and I'll level with you, because one of the first rockets that I wanted to find was the good old classic Estes SR-71 Blackbird, and I got like 4 or 5 of those now, and I've built one since I got back into the hobby, but it's, one of the ones that I saw back in the day was yours. And I know that you're not producing the SR-71 right now, but, once in a while you'll kick one out. I've seen that. But one of these days, I'm going to say it, I just recently got my level 3 certification for high power. And one of the things that I always told myself I was going to do is I'm going to get back into the modeling aspect after I did that level 3, and one of the things I want to do is I want to build one of your gliders, because I feel like I owe it to myself to do that. And I encourage other people, listening to the show that have been building model rockets for, eternities and decades, to get one of your gliders and give it a shot. They look cool. I've seen them fly. And, if you get the components to do all that stuff, seeing those land was very gratifying. And I always preach the satisfying feeling. I can imagine how you feel landing each one of those birds on its belly every time. So, I encourage listeners to do the same and grab some of this stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I was a rocket nerd when I was little. The X-15 to me was just the coolest freaking thing ever.
Right.
It still really is to me. And, even at my age, boosting an X-15 and piling it back to a nose-high landing is just the coolest thing ever, right? I nerd out every time I fly those kind of things, right? It's if I was a kid doing this, I'd just be losing my mind, because this is so neat to me. But it's
fun stuff.
Simple, fun. I have done, personally, I've done some bigger ones that use the new AeroTech H13 motors, which burn for 17 seconds. And that's that is a real hoot.
Would one of those
they
be that Avro Aero that you posted on the Rocketry forum back in January?
Yep. There's an Avro Aero. There's a big YF-12 sitting back there in the corner.
Oh my gosh!
Which that one goes to about 1,200 feet, and that starts getting to be on the edge of my vision.
Okay, yeah.
Even at that size, so those I don't kit because they're just too big.
Right.
I can't get them to fit into any reasonable size shipping box.
Right.
Without cutting them into too many pieces that wouldn't be strong enough putting them together, and so those are just one-offs for me. But I think over here you can see the nose of a big Battlestar Galactica Viper.
How big is that one? What's the?
That's about 4.5 feet tall. It's a 4-inch diameter. BT-101.
Okay.
Awesome.
That
one flies on G80s.
Nice. Okay.
So you can do same. They're basically just upscales with thicker foam, same as the kits. Yeah, you can apply the same kind of technique. It's a simplistic building style that's not complicated. There's no balsa wood. There's no sanding and there's no sealing. Filling, right? The foam stuff's very easy to work with. It's white. You don't necessarily have to paint them. It's for people like me that are extremely lazy or impatient, right? They go together super quick.
And the glue of choice, that you were mentioning is available at most hobby stores. I mean, every time you look at CA, you're going to find the foam CA right next to it. So keep your eyes out for that and just grab a bottle when you're out there.
It has to be foam safe.
Right.
Otherwise, it'll melt the foam.
Right, and
the kits come with spare pieces of foam that you can use to test your paint or glue.
Oh, awesome!
Or if you have an accident, need to cut out a chunk and glue a little patch in place. So that is in there.
Oh, that's great.
The stuff I recommend definitely works.
So the new technology that's available now versus what was available back in the day, has that helped you in your production on your kits at all? Like, is there stuff that's available now that wasn't available 10, 20 years ago when you were into high power rocketry and all that?
Yeah, I mean, the foam definitely wasn't available.
Okay.
In the same the same density, smoothness, flatness, flexibility, but the right stiffness.
Okay.
That wasn't there. When I got into RC in the mid 80s, super glue had just come out for modeling, and so that was a new thing. So that was another game changer because you didn't have to wait for glues. And of course, the miniaturization of the receiver. Right now the little receivers I use are 7 grams. If you were to take it out of the case, it's probably more like 3.
Okay, wow,
grams, right? So everything's lighter. The lithium polymer batteries weren't there before.
Mm-hmm.
So you can take a little stick battery that's like a 500 milliamp hour battery, and I've flown 12 flights in a day and put back maybe 130 into the battery. So plenty of capacity for lots of flights in a tiny little thing that's $9, right there. That whole stuff has been a game changer. And then of course AeroTech's love of long burn motors. That's the other thing that has enabled things to be easier to fly and manufacture them. There are a lot of things like the cricket cutters and laser cutters,
right,
that would speed production kind of things, but at the volumes that I'm doing, it's just not cost effective for what I'm doing. The laser cutting also would melt the edges of the foam.
Right.
So you get a little bit of a hard edge. And so if you're trying to sand or bevel that, you kind of need to work through that. Not that that's not neat, but sometimes the foam has a little bit of variation in thickness. So cutting in the tubes and slotting them by hand, I can get those to fit better than if it was a generic
formulated cut somehow.
Laser slot, right? So I haven't gone down that route just because my
I like to slot.
I just don't sell enough of these things.
I like to slot my own tubes with my guide and my X-Acto knife to start, and then if I get brave, I'll use my Dremel like on the thicker phenolic stuff. But for cardboard purposes, I like to use my knife.
Yeah, and I've all done those parts for you, so you don't need to worry about.
Well, thank you.
That in general, but yeah, so it's these are all I cut them by hand with templates that I've made and an X-Acto knife. And I do the best I can. I think you'll see that in the parts. People are surprised when they open them up and they're like, geez, that didn't take very long at all, right? James Duffy's put a couple together and he's like, man, an hour and a half was an exaggeration.
That's
Yeah,
awesome.
he's like, man, that was.
Because James is the man. If you impress James, you did pretty good, Frank. I got a question though. Like, I've seen the phone before, and I have fat guy finger hands. Bass player hands is what I like to call them. So when I bend one of these pieces of foam or I do something wrong, how do I fix that? What's the best way to do it if you don't have the patch long enough to, fix a big crease? What would you recommend, man? Because I could see this happening. I ain't gonna lie.
So the Depron foam, right? That doesn't have a cardboard skin on it like a foam board.
Exactly.
Right. So the problem with foam board is once you crease it, it's lost its strength. That's the problem with foam board, because once that paper is bent, the underlying foam is very flexible. So you lose that. There are other advantages to having the paper, but generally I don't like that material. It's heavier. You have to be a little more careful painting it because of the adhesion of the paper. So I really like Depron. It's very consistent. It's somewhat flexible, but if you bend it too much, it'll crack.
Right. Is that available like any hobby store? I guess is what I'm trying to say.
Not really. It wasn't actually what I'm using for my kits. I bought 4 years ago when the company that was importing it went out of business.
Oh,
and the company that was importing it from Europe, and they changed their manufacturing technique, and it wasn't coming flat anymore. It was coming curved in four.
Interesting.
All four corners were curved, but because their market is insulation for flooring, they don't care.
Right, because it can compress.
This small guy that would buy a container or two a year, was irrelevant. So he got too many complaints because, how can you laser cut something that's curved unless you have a really strong vacuum bed? You got to design that curve out of it when you put pieces together. So just recently, I'm working off the stash that I still have that I'm almost done with, but a guy named Greg Tanis, who has rcdepron.com.
Okay.
He builds kits, and he went through all of the hoops to get a container into the U.S. So now he is selling that foam.
Well, thanks for sharing.
And
hopefully you didn't give away any trade secrets there, but
No. Modelers are ecstatic because there's been a couple of interim substitutions, but they've all had their problems.
All right.
One of the replacements was the thickness had a lot of variation between sheets. One side was smooth, but the other side had a lot of waves or grain to it.
Got it.
It was much more flexible, so you had to use more carbon fiber or use shorter wingspans. But it was very formable. So if you were doing, like formers and skin over a structure and you were going to sand and fill it, it was very nice. But for the simplistic flat things that I'm doing, it was problematic. And so there really hasn't been a good replacement. So, you have to go out of your way. Mostly what's going to happen is you're going to hit something hard when you land, like a rock or a bush.
Well, I'm also that guy that nicks
it takes a ding.
I'm also that guy that nicks his freshly painted models on the door going up the stairs. So I am that guy.
I've had more damage getting my airplanes in and out of the car.
Oh yeah, and this guy
literally, right?
Just so everybody know, this dude, he has a really nice van that he takes, for his long commutes. But when we were in Washington, this guy pulls up in this super awesome Challenger and has like 70 gliders in there. I kid you not. So it's kind of funny to see you do that. So I'm surprised you packed all that stuff in the trunk of that car. That was impressive.
That one's tougher to fit it. It has a big trunk, but if I'm going by myself, I can do that. But yeah, they're pretty durable. They're so light is the thing, right? So you'd really have to be really ham-handed and slam a door on it to really break a wing, or usually what's going to happen is you take a little chunk out of it, and so either you sand it, or it looks a little ugly for a while, or if it's a clean break, you can use the super glue, use a little bit of clear packing tape on both sides, and then eventually you'll get over that hurdle, and you don't. I've been flying a lot of these things for 10 years. I've got
dude.
50 flights on some of these things. So they'll last a long time if you're fairly gentle with them. But you don't need to be afraid of the material. It's pretty strong. But
good to know.
It is foam. So if you whack into the door on your way out, you can break it. But you try to be a little more careful than.
So I'm excited to see you at NSO, man. I think, it's going to be a huge event. There's going to be a lot of people there. And I think a lot of them are going to see gliders for the very first time. And I'm excited to have talked to you now because I hope some people, get into this with you because, it's fun stuff. And I've seen it. I've seen the look on your face, Frank. You've been doing this so long, and when you line those things on their belly, I can see your smile and your smirk, and I hope that other people get to enjoy that as well. So that's the basis,
right. That's really why I'm doing this. It's to give something back. I don't, this stuff pays for my time.
Okay.
But I'm not, this isn't like I import it from China and there's 100% markup, right?
Okay. That makes sense.
I'm charging my materials cost and my time.
And the prices on your motors and the hardware, that you have on the website, that's really, really good considering the size and everything. And we all know what the vendor prices are for motors, all in general terms. So I think you have really great deals on your propellants. So, you can tell that you're helping out your customers, and that's really nice of you.
I'm trying to encourage people to try this. Sure. And that's really what I'm doing. Eventually I may get burned out, but
that hasn't happened yet.
Like anything, but no, hasn't happened yet. But
can you talk about some of the models real quick?
So this is a space shuttle. This is a 1/72nd-ish. This model is about 24 inches long and about an 18-inch wingspan. The wing's slightly oversized.
Right, for stability.
It looks like a shuttle.
It's great.
It's 8.5 ounces, ready to fly with the motor in it. The nose cone just comes off. This is a built-up nose cone, so it's a pre-cut slices. There's 11 slices. You glue them all together, and then you kind of round it off to make the shape, and glue a little coupler on, and the
that's what holds it in.
I know the little wire there. The receiver is just sitting right up here.
Too simple.
And the battery just Velcros right there. And this particular one, I worked with Boyce Aerospace, and they have a set of plug-in nozzles.
The nozzles, yeah. Fantastic.
Just for display, if you like that. This is the Buran. So it's basically the same kit.
The Buran, that's the Soviet version,
Buran.
Right? Yeah.
Right, and Sticker Shock does decals for both kinds. It's basically the same kit. It doesn't have the OMS pods on the back.
That is
because they have these little.
That is a cool looking, huge thrusters. Shuttle, Frank. That is really, really cool.
It's a nice size, and this one goes like heck. This boosts to about 750 feet.
That's
both
awesome.
of the shuttles. They go high, and you'll get about a minute and a half of glide time. It's a pretty good glide time. And this one also, Boyce, in addition to the nozzles, they also make a nose cone. So if you don't feel comfortable sanding the foam,
right,
you can also get from them the nozzles and the nose cone, which is a 3D printed nose cone. And it's a plug and play replacement. You trim the front here, the wing just a little bit. There's instructions on how to do that because this unit is slightly shorter because of the way I have to. Yeah. So again, this is about it's a 1/72nd scale. You can get the 3D printed parts from Boyce if you want to, and there's a little modification to the wing so that it lines up with the plastic nose cone versus the built up wing, just because of the way I had to build the part.
Makes sense.
It's little you just trim a little bit off the wing and that's it.
So these are the shuttle gliders themselves. So they don't have like the solid rocket boosters or the main booster.
No, these both take E6 motors,
right,
and they boost vertically on their own. But they're a nice representation. A couple of my smaller ones. This is the Star Clipper.
The Star Clipper is the Condor looking airplane.
You're thinking of the Valkyrie probably.
Oh, okay.
This is just kind of like a business jet looking rocket plane, low wing, a little bit of dihedral, and this uses BT60 tubing. And this weighs 5 ounces, ready to fly, and it uses the little 18 millimeter motors.
Okay.
The Valkyrie is the other one. This is based kind of on the XB-70 Valkyrie bomber with the twin tails and the high-mounted delta
nice
wing.
Big triangle span for the fins, for the wings there.
Right. Again, 5 ounces, ready to fly.
BT60 based as well.
BT60, yeah, for the 18 millimeter. This one is called the Iron Cross.
That's my favorite looking one that you have.
This is a sort of a pseudo. If Germany had made a rocket plane in World War I as a monoplane, this is my idea of what it would have looked like. It's BT 80 tubing, so 2.6 inch tubing like the shuttles.
Okay.
and with a Big Bertha style
rounded nose cone,
and a World War I style biplane vertical stabilizer, and the wings are kind of bird-like, so they're kind of curved and swept, and they have scalloped trailing edges. And the inspiration for this was the old RC airplane called the Das Ugly Stick. And that's where this color scheme with the red and the white stripes on the wings and the iron crosses. But
it looks fabulous. I invite everybody to go to your website to take a look at this one for sure. And
these are all Sticker Shock's decals. All the pictures you see on the website use his decals, and you can see the little machine gun decals that it comes with as well. This is the YF-12. So this is an interceptor version that they made of the SR-71.
Right.
The chines are a little shorter and they cut off, and that's because this was for launching missiles. So you had a radar in the nose, so it had to use a rounded nose for the radar to fit in there. And this is currently the SR-71 styled model that I make. And this one, because of the shorter chines and the rounded nose cone, it's a little simpler to make, and it's about an ounce lighter than the SR-71 kits.
Interesting.
And I don't have to get custom 3D printed nose cones.
Okay.
Made, so it's less expensive, lighter, flies better, and it still has that great look. Again, simple to put together the way I've done it, but this is a good flying model. And this, if you have good flying skills, you can use higher thrust motors with that one. Probably the one I'm most proud of is this little X-15.
His X-15 is amazing, guys.
This is a 121st or 121st scale.
Okay.
X-15. So this is the same size as the Apogee kit, but this is designed from the ground up to be RC, and it's much lighter. This weighs 7.5 ounces ready to fly with the motor installed.
That's fantastic.
So it's BT60. It has the the nice chines. This is a 3D model with the canopy and all, and flies really, really nicely. It's fairly scale. It's really, the X-15s I've done are the only kits that anyone's ever done of an RCable X-15.
Perfect.
And I think the last one, this is the Aurora Clipper. This is another BT60 or BT80 model with a PNC 80K nose cone.
Nice big plane.
And this is about 36, 37 inches long with a 23-inch wingspan. And it's a low wing, delta wing with a little bit of dihedral. Sticker Shock has decal sets. This one has TWA
right.
decals, just because I thought Trans World sounded more spacey than Pan Am. But he does do Pan Am decals for this too, for the 2001 Space Odyssey fans out there, kind of retro.
There you go.
But he can do any airline kind of scheme you want. But and again, this one's about 10.5 ounces ready to fly on the E6 motors as well. So, we carry the motors, single-use motors, as well as reloads. I try to carry everything that you would need other than the radio equipment, which is fairly, it's sort of a personal choice. RC guys get very personal with what kind of radio equipment and servos they like to use. So it'd be too hard to carry that stuff.
No, I understand. I know that you still build rockets, and I kind of want to ask you, if there's something that you're willing to share about what you might potentially fly at NSL. You have a round foam rocket that you're going to be putting up this year?
I'm not sure if I'll fly it at NSL. It depends on the landing surface.
It's kind of rough.
So I do. Yeah, so I do. It all depends on how. So I'm renting a van to go there because my van's 21 years old.
Oh, okay.
So I'm gonna rent a van to go there this time, and so it depends how much I can cram in there, because I want to bring all of the gliders and the kits and stuff. I'm going to fly for that. If I have room, I'm going to throw my 8-inch diameter Titan II in the back, and that's an all foam rocket. It's built up with stringers, centering rings, foam skin,
guys,
vinyl covering,
wow.
And it's about 7 feet tall and weighs about 5.5 pounds with an I-205 in it. And so that'll boost to about 1,100 feet, which is plenty high, and you get to see the whole deployment. I am going to NCR's launch the following week,
right,
which is more of a grassy
Mile High Mayhem.
area.
Yep.
So if I can fit that in the van, I probably will fly it there. It's just with the foam structure and the fins, it's a little less tolerant of abrasive surfaces.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah, where I normally fly in Washington is on a sod farm.
I was going to say, you fly at the sod farm, right?
Soft grass.
So you're friends with good old Scott Binder out there, aren't you? John Thompson and all those guys.
I don't fly out at Eastern Oregon so much because it's sagebrush.
Right.
And sagebrush isn't very nice to foam. The reason I started doing SR-71 based kits is because people were paying stupid money on eBay for Hobby Lab SR-71 models, which back in the day, that was a great kit. Now, 20 years later, the airframe's still fine, but, old technology servos, sliding mechanical trays, a little bit smaller, you shouldn't be paying $200 for that model unless you're a collector and you just got to have one of those things, right?
I understand.
That's why I wanted to make these so that, you could make something to fly. It wouldn't be quite as fragile. And, you weren't going to be heartbroken if you did do something to it. So I'm hoping that people, build them and fly them. And that's what they're there for. They're not fancy looking. They come, it's a plain cardboard box, no pictures. I don't want to charge you for that kind of stuff.
Your website already has most of those instructions on there, right?
That's the only place the instructions are. So there's
you can go and take a look at them
with
now.
The name of the model.
Okay.
Everything's online, and the advantage of that is, if I have a mistake, I can fix it immediately or update something.
Frank, I'm really, like I said before, I'm really, honored to be able to talk with you about this. This is something I've been wanting to do for a while, so, I have a little bit of a personal vendetta to be the one that got to talk to you today. So, thank you, Noob, for, letting me step in and talk to Frank, for you guys. And if any of you have any questions for Frank, feel free to reach out to us on, the Model Rocket Show, and, you can always message Frank directly. If there's any questions or anything that you have, feel free to reach out because, he'll answer any of your questions for you. And very accessible. We appreciate the work that you've done for the industry and the hobby, Frank. So thank you so much.
Thanks very much, and thanks for having me. I appreciate the time and the forum.
All right, thanks a lot, Jesse, you of The Rocketry Show, for taking over for me and chatting with Frank Burke. Thank you so much, Frank, for coming on the Model Rocket Show at TheRocketryShow.com. Again, you can find Dyna Soar Rocketry at our website, TheModelRocketShow.com. In the show notes, we're going to link right to Frank's website so you can go check out those beautiful kits and pick yourself one up. That's really it. If you like the show, please share it with a friend. Tell someone about it. It's always fun to run into somebody at a launch who has been listening to the podcast. Really enjoy that. And if you need to get in touch with us, you can send me an email, noob@themodelrocketshow.com. That's N00B at themodelrocketshow.com. I do check that email most days, and every now and then I get something that ends up in my spam filter, and I don't see it for a while, but I do check that check that folder every now and then. So if I don't get right back to you, just hang tight, and I'll get to you as soon as I can. All right, that's it. That's the Model Rocket Show at themodelrocketshow.com. See you next time.
This show is brought to you by the support of our sponsors and listeners. If you wish to support the show for just a few dollars a month, please become a patron by visiting patreon.com/TheRocketryShow. Don't forget to check out our sister show, TheRocketryShow.com, a program that is all about advanced and high-power rocketry. The views and opinions expressed on these programs are those of the participants and do not necessarily reflect those of Little Beth Entertainment or its sponsors.